The white lace of Beatrice Garrett's wedding dress seemed to mock her as she stood alone beneath the wooden arch in front of Genoa's small church. The June sun of 1878 beating down mercilessly on her unveiled head. Every person in the Nevada town had gathered to witness what should have been the happiest moment of her life. But instead, they watched in horrified silence as minutes stretched into an eternity, and her groom failed to appear. The whispers started soft, then grew louder, and Beatrice felt her heart cracking like drought-parched earth as the terrible truth settled over her like a burial shroud. He was not coming. Frederick Marsh had abandoned her at the altar. Her hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet of wildflowers her younger sister had gathered that morning from the meadow behind their family's small ranch. The ribbon wrapped around the stems felt suddenly too tight in her grip. She stood frozen, unable to move forward or backward, trapped in this moment of public humiliation while everyone stared. Her mother had risen from the front pew, face pale and pinched with shame and anger. Her father looked murderous, his weathered rancher's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Beatrice wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the earth. She wanted to wake up and discover this was nothing more than a terrible nightmare. But her legs would not obey her, and she remained rooted to that spot, feeling every eye upon her, hearing every pitying murmur. 22 years old and already a laughingstock. The jilted bride of Genoa. That would be her legacy now. The minister, Reverend Thompson, cleared his throat uncomfortably and began to say something about postponing the ceremony when the sound of hoofbeats interrupted him. Everyone turned as one to watch a lone rider approach at a steady canter down the main street. The horse was a magnificent bay gelding, and the man in the saddle sat with the easy confidence of someone born to ride. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, dark pants and boots that had seen better days. A black hat shaded his face from the sun, and Beatrice could see the glint of a badge on his chest as he drew closer. He reined his horse to a stop at the edge of the small crowd that had gathered outside the church. For a moment, he simply sat there, taking in the scene. Beatrice felt his gaze settle on her, and even from this distance, she could sense the intensity of his scrutiny. Then he swung down from the saddle with practiced grace and walked forward, the crowd parting instinctively to let him through. Beatrice recognized him vaguely. Nathan James. The deputy marshal who had passed through Genoa occasionally over the past year, usually tracking outlaws or transporting prisoners to Carson City. He was a quiet man, probably around 28 or 29, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. She had never spoken to him directly, though she had noticed him once or twice when he stopped at her father's ranch to water his horse. He walked right up to where she stood beneath the arch, stopping just a few feet away. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the strong line of his jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and the serious set of his mouth. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between sympathy and determination. "Miss," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot, "I could not help but notice you find yourself in a difficult situation." Beatrice's throat closed up. She could not speak, could not do anything but stare at this stranger who had materialized as if from nowhere. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, and she felt the weight of the entire town's attention pressing down on her shoulders. Nathan James looked at the gathered crowd, then back at her. He removed his hat, revealing that unruly dark hair, and held it respectfully against his chest. "I know we have not been properly introduced, and I know this is going to sound presumptuous as all hell, but I have got a proposition for you." "A proposition?" Beatrice finally managed to whisper, her voice cracking on the words. "You are standing here ready to be married, dressed for it and everything, with all these people watching." His gray eyes held her steadily, and she saw no mockery in them, no pity, only a kind of fierce sincerity. "Seems to me the man who was supposed to stand beside you does not deserve you. Never did, if he could do this to you, but you should not have to bear this shame alone." "I do not understand what you are saying," Beatrice said, though her heart had begun to pound in her chest. Nathan James stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and horse and the faint scent of sage on his clothes. "I will stand beside you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Right here, right now, if you will have me. Give these people the wedding they came to see. Give yourself the dignity that coward tried to steal from you." Beatrice's mouth fell open. "You cannot be serious. You do not even know me." "I know you did not deserve this." His voice was rough with conviction. "I know you are standing here with more courage than most men I have seen face down armed outlaws. And I know that if you walk away from here today unwed, with everyone watching and whispering, it will haunt you for the rest of your life. This town will never let you forget it." He was right. Beatrice knew he was right. In a small town like Genoa, this kind of scandal would follow her forever. She would be the woman Frederick Marsh left at the altar, the woman no man wanted. Every social gathering, every Sunday service, every trip to the general store would be colored by this moment of public humiliation. "But you do not want to marry me," she said, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of cruel joke. "Why would you do this?" Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, something dark and old. "Let us just say I know what it feels like to be left behind, to be deemed not worth staying for. No one should have to feel that way." Beatrice looked past him at the crowd. Her mother was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Her father looked confused and angry. The townspeople were murmuring amongst themselves, speculation running wild. She thought about her life stretching ahead, forever marked by this day, forever defined by Frederick's betrayal. Then she looked back at Nathan James, this stranger who had ridden into town and offered her salvation. There was something solid about him, something steady. She thought about the alternative, about gathering up her skirts and fleeing through this crowd while everyone whispered and stared. About going home to her parents' ranch in disgrace, about spending the rest of her life as an object of pity. "All right," she heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her. "All right, I will marry you." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Nathan's expression did not change, but she saw his shoulders relax slightly, as if he had been braced for her refusal. He nodded once, then turned to face Reverend Thompson, who was staring at them both with his mouth hanging open. "Reverend," Nathan said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "if you would be so kind as to proceed with the ceremony, the lady and I would like to be married." But, Reverend Thompson sputtered, "I do not even know if you are a member of this congregation." "Are you a Christian man, sir?" "I am," Nathan replied simply. "And I am a lawman with a steady income and no criminal record. I can provide for a wife. Will that suffice?" The Reverend looked helplessly at Beatrice's father, who had pushed his way to the front of the crowd. Thomas Garrett was a big man, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with a thick beard shot through with gray. He studied Nathan with shrewd eyes. "You are the deputy marshal from Carson City," Thomas said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir, Nathan James." "Why would you do this?" "What is your game?" Nathan met his gaze without flinching. "No game, sir. I have seen your daughter around town. She has always seemed like a decent, respectable woman. She does not deserve what has happened here today. If she will have me, I will do my best to be a good husband to her." Thomas turned to Beatrice. "Beatrice, Is this what you want? You do not have to do this. You can come home with us. We will weather this storm together as a family." Beatrice looked at her father, this man who had always tried to protect her, and she loved him for the offer. But she could see the humiliation in his eyes too, the shame that his daughter had been rejected so publicly. And she knew that going home would not erase what had happened. It would only postpone the inevitable gossip and speculation. "I want to go through with it, Papa," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Mr. James is right. I came here today to be married, and married I shall be." Her mother had made her way forward as well, her face tear-streaked and worried. "Beatrice, darling, you cannot marry a complete stranger. This is madness." "Is it any more mad than what Frederick did to me?" Beatrice asked, and she heard the bitterness in her own words. "At least Mr. James has the decency to show up. That is more than my intended could manage." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back actually laughed, though whether at her words or at the absurdity of the situation, Beatrice could not tell. She felt a strange sort of calm settling over her, as if she had stepped outside herself and was watching all of this happen to someone else. Nathan reached out and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but not forceful. "We will figure this out together," he said quietly. "One step at a time. I promise you I will not abandon you, not today, not ever." Beatrice found herself believing him. Perhaps it was foolish. Perhaps she would regret this decision for the rest of her life. But in this moment, with her world crumbling around her, Nathan James felt like the only solid thing she had to hold on to. "All right," Reverend Thompson said, resignation in his voice. "If everyone is in agreement, I suppose we should proceed. Though I must say, in 30 years of performing marriages, I have never seen anything quite like this." He opened his Bible and began to read the familiar words of the marriage ceremony. Beatrice felt as if she were floating, disconnected from reality. Nathan stood beside her, still holding her hand, his presence surprisingly comforting. She had imagined her wedding day 1,000 times, but never like this. Never with a stranger at her side instead of Frederick, never with the ghost of betrayal hanging over everything. When Reverend Thompson asked if anyone objected to the union, Beatrice held her breath. But no one spoke. The crowd seemed too stunned to do anything but watch in fascinated silence. "Do you, Nathan James, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Nathan said, his voice clear and strong. The Reverend turned to Beatrice. "And do you, Beatrice Garrett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Beatrice opened her mouth, and for a moment no sound came out. Then she looked at Nathan, at his steady gray eyes and the serious set of his jaw, and she thought about courage, about choosing to move forward instead of retreating in shame. "I do," she said. "Do we have rings?" Reverend Thompson asked, looking between them. Nathan reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "My mother's," he said quietly to Beatrice. "It is all I have with me, but it is yours if you will accept it." Beatrice stared at the ring, wondering at the story behind it, wondering what kind of man carried his dead mother's wedding ring in his pocket. "I have nothing to give you in return," she whispered. "Does not matter," Nathan replied. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Nevada and the grace of God, I pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Thompson closed his Bible with a decisive snap. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. James." Nathan hesitated, clearly uncertain. Beatrice's heart hammered in her chest. This was a stranger, a man she had never even spoken to before today. But he was her husband now, bound to her by law and by God, and everyone was watching. She made the decision for both of them, rising up on her toes and pressing a brief, chaste kiss to his lips. His mouth was warm and surprisingly soft, and she felt him freeze in surprise before his free hand came up to rest lightly on her waist. When they broke apart, a smattering of applause rose from the crowd, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. It was not the joyous celebration that should have followed a wedding, but it was not silence either. Beatrice turned to face the townspeople as Beatrice James, no longer Beatrice Garrett, no longer the jilted bride but a married woman with a husband at her side. Her mother was still crying, but now her father had his arm around her shoulders, and they both wore expressions of bewildered relief. The crisis had been averted, at least for now. The gossip would still come, Beatrice knew, but it would be different. People would talk about the strange wedding, about the mysterious lawman who rode in and claimed the abandoned bride, but she would not be an object of pure pity. There was something almost romantic about it, something that would capture imaginations. Nathan kept hold of her hand as they walked down the makeshift aisle together, past rows of benches and curious faces. Someone had prepared a small reception in the church hall, with food and drink that would have been for her wedding to Frederick. Beatrice felt a surge of anger at the thought of him, wherever he was. Had he planned this? Had he woken up this morning with the intention of leaving her at the altar, or had he simply lost his nerve at the last moment? "Are you all right?" Nathan asked as they entered the church hall, speaking low enough that only she could hear. "I do not know," Beatrice answered honestly. "This is the strangest day of my life. I imagine so." He released her hand to remove his vest and badge, hanging them carefully over the back of a chair. "I am sorry it had to be this way. You have nothing to apologize for." Beatrice looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, with strong features and those remarkable gray eyes. There was a small scar on his left cheekbone, white against his tanned skin. "You saved me. I know that sounds dramatic, but it is true. You saved me from something I am not sure I could have survived." "You would have survived," Nathan said with quiet certainty. "You are stronger than you know, but you should not have had to." People began filing into the hall, tentative and uncertain. Beatrice's family arrived, her mother immediately pulling her into a tight embrace. "Oh, my darling girl," Margaret Garrett whispered against her hair. "What have you done?" "What I had to," Beatrice replied. She pulled back to look at her mother. "Please, Mama, I need you to support me in this. I cannot bear it if you think I have made a terrible mistake." Margaret cupped her daughter's face in her hands, searching her eyes. Then she sighed and kissed her forehead. "You are a married woman now. Your husband seems like a decent man, though heaven knows we do not know anything about him. I suppose we will all have to make the best of this situation." Thomas approached Nathan, extending his hand. "I suppose you are my son-in-law now. Welcome to the family such as it is." Nathan shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, sir. I know this is not what you had planned for your daughter." "What I had planned was for her to marry a man who would cherish her and treat her with respect." Thomas's voice was hard. "Frederick Marsh proved he was not that man. I pray to God you will be." "I will do my best, sir." Beatrice's sister, 17-year-old Catherine, bounded up with her characteristic enthusiasm. "This is the most exciting thing that has ever happened in Genoa. Wait until I tell everyone at school. My sister married a deputy marshal." "Catherine," Margaret said warningly, but there was no real anger in her voice. The reception proceeded awkwardly. People came up to congratulate them, though most seemed unsure what to say. The food was eaten, though without much enthusiasm. Someone had made a wedding cake, and Beatrice found herself cutting it with Nathan at her side, his hand over hers on the knife, in a strange parody of normalcy. As the afternoon wore on, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was married, to a man she did not know. And tonight, she would be expected to leave with him, to begin her life as his wife. The thought sent a chill of fear through her. Nathan seemed to sense her anxiety. He stayed close to her throughout the reception, a steady presence at her side, but he did not crowd her or make demands. When people asked about their plans, he deferred to her, making it clear that she had a voice in what happened next. Finally, as the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, Thomas pulled them both aside. "What are your intentions now, Nathan? Will you be taking Beatrice away?" Nathan looked at Beatrice before answering. "I have a small house in Carson City, about 20 miles from here. I had planned to spend tonight at the hotel in Genoa and then head back tomorrow. But I leave that decision to my wife. If she would prefer to stay here for a few days to say goodbye to her family and gather her belongings, I can arrange that." Beatrice felt a rush of gratitude for his consideration. "I would like that," she said. "I would like a little time before we leave. Then that is what we will do." Nathan turned to Thomas. "With your permission, sir, I would like to take rooms at the hotel tonight. Separate rooms," he added, seeing the protective flash in Thomas's eyes. "I think we both need time to adjust to this situation before we begin living as husband and wife in truth." Thomas nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "That seems reasonable, and tomorrow you will come to the ranch for dinner. I want to get to know the man who married my daughter. I would be honored." The reception finally wound down as evening approached. Guests began to depart, offering final congratulations and curious glances. Beatrice hugged her family goodbye, promising to see them the next day, and then she found herself walking down the main street of Genoa beside her new husband, her wedding dress rustling with each step. The hotel was a modest 2-story building at the end of the street. Nathan spoke to the clerk, a middle-aged man named Howard who kept glancing at Beatrice with undisguised curiosity, and secured 2 rooms side by side on the second floor. "I will leave you to rest," Nathan said as they stood in the hallway between their doors. "This has been a long day for both of us." Beatrice nodded, suddenly exhausted. "Thank you for everything. I still cannot quite believe you did what you did. I could not ride away and leave you standing there." Nathan looked uncomfortable, as if discussing his own motivations embarrassed him. "It would not have been right. Most men would not have cared. Then I suppose most men and I do not see eye to eye." He tipped his hat to her. "Good night, Beatrice. If you need anything, I am right next door." "Good night, Nathan." She went into her room and closed the door, leaning against it as her legs finally gave out. She slid down to sit on the floor, her wedding dress pooling around her like sea foam, and finally allowed herself to cry. Great racking sobs tore through her chest, releasing all the fear and humiliation and confusion she had been holding back all day. She cried for the life she had planned with Frederick, for the love she had thought they shared that had turned out to be an illusion. She cried for the loss of her innocence, for the bitter lesson that people were not always what they seemed. And she cried for the uncertainty of the future, married to a stranger who had shown her more kindness in a single afternoon than Frederick had in months of courtship. Eventually, the tears subsided. Beatrice dragged herself up and out of the wedding dress, hanging it carefully in the wardrobe, though she never wanted to see it again. She washed her face in the basin on the dresser and pulled on her nightgown. Then she climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Through the wall, she could hear Nathan moving around in his room. The creak of floorboards, the sound of boots being removed and set down. It was strange to know he was there, this man who was now her husband. She knew nothing about him beyond what she had seen today. Was he kind? Was he cruel? Did he have a temper? Did he drink? All the questions she should have asked before marrying someone, and she had not asked any of them. But then, she thought of the way he had looked at her beneath the church arch, the way he had held her hand during the ceremony, the way he had deferred to her wishes about where to spend the night. Those were not the actions of a cruel man. Beatrice closed her eyes and willed herself to sleep, but it was a long time coming. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of riding across the desert on a bay horse, with strong arms around her waist and the promise of something better waiting on the horizon. The next morning, Beatrice woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sounds of Genoa coming to life below. For a moment, she forgot where she was and what had happened. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up with a gasp. She was married. She was Beatrice James now. A knock at the door made her jump. "Beatrice, are you awake?" Nathan's voice, low and respectful. She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and went to the door, opening it a crack. He stood in the hallway, already dressed in clean clothes, his hair still damp as if he had just washed. "Good morning," he said. "I thought we might have breakfast together, get to know each other a bit before we head to your parents' ranch. That would be good." Beatrice hesitated. "Give me a few minutes to dress." "Take your time. I will wait downstairs." She closed the door and hurried to make herself presentable. She had only the clothes she had brought with her to town the day before, expecting to leave the church as Frederick's wife and head directly to the small house he had rented for them. The thought of Frederick sent a fresh wave of anger through her, but she pushed it aside. She could not afford to dwell on his betrayal. She had to focus on the present, on the strange new reality of her marriage to Nathan. When she came downstairs, she found him sitting at a corner table in the hotel's small dining room. He stood when he saw her, pulling out a chair in a gesture of courtesy that surprised her. Frederick had never bothered with such manners. They ordered eggs and bacon and coffee, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. Beatrice was acutely aware of the other diners glancing their way, whispering behind their hands. News of yesterday's events had clearly spread through the entire town. "I suppose we should talk," Nathan finally said, setting down his coffee cup. "About what comes next?" "Yes," Beatrice agreed. She folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "I realize we went about this all backwards. We are married, but we do not know anything about each other. Then let us start fixing that." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her with those steady gray eyes. "What do you want to know about me?" Beatrice had so many questions she did not know where to begin. "Why did you really do it? Yesterday, I mean. Why did you offer to marry me?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "My father abandoned my mother when I was 10 years old, just walked out one day and never came back. She waited for him for years, always believing he would return. She died waiting. I watched what that abandonment did to her, how it broke her spirit. When I saw you standing there, I saw her, and I could not let history repeat itself if I had the power to stop it." The raw honesty in his words took Beatrice's breath away. "I am so sorry. That must have been terrible for you both. It was a long time ago," but she could see it still hurt him. "My point is, I know what it feels like to be left behind, to wonder what you did wrong, what you could have done differently. You did nothing wrong, Beatrice. That coward who left you, whatever his reasons, the fault lies with him, not you." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. "Thank you for saying that. I keep wondering if there was something I missed, some sign that Frederick was going to do this. Even if there was, it does not excuse his actions. Nathan's voice was firm. A man who makes a promise should keep it, especially a promise like marriage. Is that what you intend to do? Keep this promise? Yes. No hesitation, no doubt. I am not in the habit of making vows I do not mean to honor. For better or worse, we are married now. I intend to do right by you. Beatrice took a sip of her coffee, trying to gather her courage for the next question. What does that mean exactly? What kind of marriage are you expecting? Nathan seemed to understand what she was really asking. I am not going to force you into anything you are not ready for. I know yesterday was not what you planned. I know I am not who you plan to marry. We will take this at whatever pace you need. If you want time to get to know me before we become husband and wife in the fullest sense, I can respect that. Relief flooded through her. I would appreciate that. This is all so overwhelming. I imagine it is. He paused, then added, I should tell you about my work. Being a deputy marshal means I am gone sometimes, tracking fugitives or serving warrants. It can be dangerous work. You should know what you are getting into. How often are you gone? It varies. Sometimes weeks at a time, sometimes just a few days. I have a house in Carson City, like I said. It is not much, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it is solid and it is paid for. If you would rather stay in Genoa with your family, I can arrange that. But I would like for us to try living together, to see if we can make this marriage work. Beatrice thought about it. The idea of staying with her parents was tempting, but it also felt like retreating. If she was going to be married to Nathan, she needed to commit to it fully. I think I would like to come to Carson City with you, though I will need to visit my family regularly. Of course, it is only a few hours' ride. You can come as often as you like. They talked more over breakfast, sharing bits and pieces of their lives. Beatrice told him about growing up on her parents' ranch, about her love of horses and her skill with a rifle that her father had taught her. Nathan told her about his years as a lawman, the places he had been, the people he had met. He spoke little of his childhood, and Beatrice did not press him. She could see the pain that lingered there. By the time they finished eating, Beatrice felt marginally better about the situation. Nathan seemed like a good man, honest and straightforward. She did not love him, of course. How could she? They were still strangers. But she thought she might be able to respect him, and perhaps that was enough to build on. They spent the rest of the morning walking around Genoa, letting themselves be seen together. It was Nathan's idea, a way of making their marriage more real in the eyes of the town. People called out congratulations and asked questions, and Nathan answered them with patient politeness. He kept one hand at the small of Beatrice's back as they walked, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. At noon, they rode out to the Garrett ranch together. Nathan had 2 horses now, his bay gelding and a pretty chestnut mare that he said would be Beatrice's. I bought her from the livery this morning, he explained. Thought you might need your own mount. The gesture touched her. Frederick had never thought to buy her a horse, even though he knew how much she loved to ride. Her family welcomed them warmly, though Beatrice could see the worry still lingering in her mother's eyes. They sat down to a large meal, and Thomas questioned Nathan extensively about his work, his background, his intentions. Nathan answered everything honestly, never seeming defensive or annoyed by the interrogation. After dinner, Beatrice and her mother went out to the garden while Nathan talked with her father in the barn. Catherine tagged along, full of questions about the wedding and Nathan and what it felt like to be married. Is he nice to you? Margaret asked, pulling weeds from between the vegetable plants. Tell me truthfully, Beatrice. He has been nothing but kind and respectful, Beatrice assured her. I know it is a strange situation, Mama, but I think it will be all right. I think Nathan is a good man. He would have to do what he did. Margaret sat back on her heels, looking at her daughter. I was so frightened for you yesterday. When Frederick did not show up, I thought my heart would break. And then that young man rode up like something out of a story, and I did not know whether to be grateful or terrified. I was both, Beatrice admitted. She knelt beside her mother, pulling at a stubborn weed. Part of me still cannot believe it happened. That I married a complete stranger on the spur of the moment. Do you regret it, did she? Beatrice considered the question carefully. I do not know yet. Ask me again in a few months, but I think I made the right choice. The alternative was unbearable. They stayed at the ranch until early evening. Then Nathan said they should head back to town. As they rode side by side through the gathering dusk, Beatrice felt a strange sense of contentment settle over her. The day had been easier than she had expected, almost pleasant. Nathan was good company, quiet but attentive, and she found herself relaxing in his presence. Your family is nice, Nathan said as they neared Genoa. Your father is protective, but I respect that. Shows he cares about you. He wanted to make sure you were not some kind of scoundrel, Beatrice said with a small smile. Can hardly blame him for that. Nathan glanced at her. Did I pass the test, do you think? I think so. Papa seemed satisfied by the end of the visit. They returned their horses to the livery and walked back to the hotel. In the lobby, Nathan turned to her. I thought we might leave for Carson City tomorrow if that suits you. Give you time to pack up your things from your parents' house. Tomorrow, Beatrice's heart jumped. So soon. But what was the point in delaying? The longer she stayed in Genoa, the harder it would be to leave. All right, tomorrow. We will take it slow. Make a few stops along the way so you are not too saddle sore. That night, alone in her hotel room, Beatrice tried to imagine what her life in Carson City would be like. She would be responsible for keeping Nathan's house, for cooking his meals, for all the duties of a wife. It was what she had expected when she agreed to marry Frederick, but somehow it felt different now. More uncertain, more real. She fell asleep wondering if Nathan was lying awake in the next room, having similar thoughts. The next morning dawned clear and bright. After breakfast, they rode out to her parents' ranch one last time. Beatrice packed her belongings with her mother's help, folding clothes and personal items into 2 large trunks. It was not much, really. Most of the things she had gathered for her married life had been intended for the house Frederick had rented, and she could not bring herself to retrieve them. Let them stay there, a monument to broken promises. Saying goodbye to her family was harder than she had expected. Catherine cried, and even her father's eyes looked suspiciously bright as he hugged her. You come back and visit as soon as you can, Margaret said, holding Beatrice tight. And if you need anything at all, you send word. I will, Mama. Thomas shook Nathan's hand. You take care of my girl, you hear? I will be checking up on you. I would expect nothing less, sir. They secured the trunks to a pack horse Nathan had purchased, then set out northwest toward Carson City. The ride would take several hours, winding through the high desert landscape of western Nevada. The June sun was already warm, but a steady breeze kept it bearable. For the first hour, they rode in companionable silence. Beatrice found herself studying Nathan, trying to memorize the details of the man who was now her husband. The way he sat his horse with easy confidence. The way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, always alert. The strength in his hands as he held the reins. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, catching her looking at him. Just trying to get used to all this, Beatrice said honestly. 2 days ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life was going to look like. Now everything has changed. Change is not always a bad thing. No, but it is frightening. That it is. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, Can I ask you something? You do not have to answer if you do not want to. Go ahead. Did you love him? "The man who left you," the question caught Beatrice off guard. She thought about Frederick, about the months they had courted. He had been charming and attentive, always saying the right things. But had she loved him? Truly loved him? "I thought I did," she said slowly. "But now I wonder if I was in love with the idea of getting married, of starting my own life, more than I was in love with Frederick himself. Does that make sense?" "It does. I think a lot of people marry for the wrong reasons. Loneliness, social pressure, financial security. Love should be part of it, but it is not always. Is that why you have never married? Because you have not found love?" Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. "I have been in love, once. A long time ago. It did not work out." "What happened?" "She married someone else. Someone with more money and better prospects than a young lawman could offer." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a kind of resigned acceptance. "I learned then that love alone is not always enough." Beatrice felt a surge of sympathy for him. "I am sorry. That must have hurt." "It did. But it also taught me to be practical, to not build my life around expectations that might never come true." He looked at her. "That is part of why I offered to marry you. I was not giving up some grand romance. I was not sacrificing anything I had. I was just trying to help someone who needed it. And now you are stuck with me." "I do not feel stuck." Nathan's voice was firm. "I meant what I said. We are married now, and I intend to honor that commitment. Maybe we will never have what you hoped for with Frederick, but we can have something. Partnership, respect, companionship. Those things matter too." "They do," Beatrice agreed. She felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of anxiety she had not even realized was there. Nathan was not expecting her to fall in love with him. He was not demanding emotions she could not yet give. He was simply offering to build something together, one day at a time. They stopped around midday beside a small creek to rest the horses and eat the lunch Margaret had packed for them. Beatrice sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, grateful for the respite from the sun. Nathan watered the horses, then came to sit beside her, stretching out his long legs with a sigh. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "We can rest longer if you need to." "I am fine. I have been riding since I was a little girl." Beatrice unwrapped the package of food, revealing thick sandwiches and fresh fruit. "Though I will admit it is strange to be heading toward a new home, a new life. Is there anything you want to know about Carson City? About the house? Tell me about the town." "I have only been there once or twice." Nathan described Carson City as they ate. It was bigger than Genoa, the capital of the Nevada Territory with a population of a few thousand people. There were shops and saloons, a courthouse, churches, even a small theater that occasionally hosted traveling performers. Nathan's house was on the outskirts of town, set back from the main streets, with a small barn for the horses and a vegetable garden that had been neglected while he was away on duty. "It is not fancy," he warned, "but it is solid. Good roof, sturdy walls. I built most of it myself when I first got the job as deputy marshal." "You built it yourself?" "My father was a carpenter before he left. He taught me a few things before he disappeared." Nathan's voice was matter of fact. Turned out to be useful skills. Beatrice was impressed despite herself. Frederick had been the son of a merchant, educated and refined, but he could not have built a house to save his life. There was something appealing about Nathan's competence, his ability to take care of himself, and now, by extension, her. They resumed their journey in the early afternoon. The landscape grew more dramatic as they traveled, with the Sierra Nevada mountains rising to the west, their peaks still touched with snow even in June. Beatrice had always loved this country, the wild beauty of it, the sense of endless space. It felt fitting somehow that she was crossing this terrain on her way to a new beginning. Carson City appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent. It was indeed larger than Genoa, with more substantial buildings and busier streets. Nathan led her through town, pointing out various landmarks: the courthouse where he sometimes had to testify, the general store where she could buy supplies, the church where they could attend services if she wished. His house was about a mile from the center of town, sitting in a small clearing surrounded by sage and scrub. It was a simple wooden structure, painted white with green shutters, exactly as he had described it. A barn stood behind it, and Beatrice could see the outline of a garden plot, currently overrun with weeds. Nathan dismounted and helped her down from her horse. "Welcome home," he said, and there was a note of nervousness in his voice that she had not heard before. Beatrice looked at the house, her house now, and felt a mixture of trepidation and curiosity. This was where she would live, where she would learn to be Nathan's wife, where she would build whatever future they managed to create together. "It is lovely," she said, and she meant it. There was something charming about the little house, something hopeful. Nathan smiled, clearly relieved by her reaction. "Let me show you inside." He unlocked the door and ushered her in. The interior was clean but sparse. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a cast iron stove, a sturdy wooden table, and 2 chairs. A bookshelf stood against one wall, half filled with volumes. A door on the left led to what Nathan explained was the bedroom. A door on the right opened onto a small room he used as an office. "I know it is not much," Nathan said, setting her trunks down carefully, "but you should feel free to change anything you like. Make it your own." Beatrice walked slowly through the space, taking it all in. It was so different from her parents' ranch house, smaller and simpler, but it had good bones. With some curtains on the windows, maybe some flowers in the garden, it could be quite cozy. She peeked into the bedroom and felt her cheeks flush. There was only one bed, a large double bed with a simple quilt. Of course, there was only one bed. This was Nathan's house, and he had been a bachelor. Why would he have 2 beds? Nathan seemed to read her mind. "I will sleep in the office for now," he said from behind her. "There is a cot in there I can use. The bedroom is yours until you feel otherwise." Beatrice turned to look at him. He stood in the doorway, expression carefully neutral, giving her space to process. "You do not have to do that. This is your house. It is our house now. And I meant what I said about taking this at your pace." He held her gaze. "I am a patient man, Beatrice. We have time." She nodded, grateful beyond words for his understanding. "Thank you." They spent the rest of the evening settling in. Nathan showed her where everything was, how to work the stove, where he kept supplies. He brought in her trunks and helped her unpack, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe beside his few spare shirts. It was strange to see their clothes mingling together, this visible evidence of their joined lives. For dinner, Beatrice made a simple meal from the provisions they had brought and what Nathan had in his larder. They ate at the small table, and Beatrice found herself relaxing into the domesticity of it. This could work, she thought. They could make this work. After dinner, Nathan went outside to tend to the horses while Beatrice washed the dishes. Through the window, she watched him moving around the barn, efficient and capable. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and she felt a sudden wave of exhaustion wash over her. It had only been 2 days since the wedding, but it felt like a lifetime. When Nathan came back inside, she was standing at the window, lost in thought. "Tired?" he asked gently. "Overwhelmed," she admitted, "but in a good way, I think. It has been quite a few days." He hung his hat on a peg by the door. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we can start figuring out our routine." Beatrice nodded and retreated to the bedroom. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, the mattress surprisingly comfortable. Through the wall, she could hear Nathan moving around in the office, preparing his makeshift bed. She felt a pang of guilt that he was sleeping on a cot in his own house, but she was not ready yet to share a bed with him. Not yet. She fell asleep thinking about Nathan's words from earlier. Partnership, respect, companionship. Maybe those things could be enough. Maybe they could grow into something more. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Beatrice spent her days making the house a home, sewing curtains, tending the garden, learning to cook on the temperamental stove. Nathan went about his work, sometimes leaving early in the morning and not returning until evening, but he was always home by nightfall. They ate their meals together, talked about their days, slowly building a friendship. At night, they retired to their separate sleeping spaces, but Beatrice found herself thinking about him more and more. The way he smiled when she said something that amused him. The way he always made sure she had everything she needed before seeing to his own comfort. The way he looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that made her heart skip. She visited her family once a week, and each time her mother asked if she was happy. Beatrice's answer evolved from "I am adjusting" to "I think I am content" to finally, after a month had passed, "Yes, Mama, I am happy." And she was. Not in the giddy, romantic way she had expected to be happy with Frederick, but in a deeper, more solid way. She respected Nathan. She liked him, and she was beginning to realize she was falling in love with him. The realization came one evening as they sat together on the small porch Nathan had built onto the front of the house. The July sun was setting, and they were watching the sky change colors while sharing a pot of coffee. "I have to leave tomorrow," Nathan said, and Beatrice's heart sank. "There is a fugitive who was spotted near Virginia City. The sheriff up there has asked for help tracking him down. How long will you be gone? A few days, maybe a week. Depends on how quickly we can find him." Nathan looked at her with concern. "Will you be all right here alone?" "I will be fine. I have the rifle you taught me to shoot, and I know how to use it." "I know you do. You are a better shot than half the men I work with." He smiled at her. "But I will worry about you anyway." "And I will worry about you," Beatrice said. The words slipped out before she could stop them, revealing more than she had intended. Nathan's expression softened. "Will you? Of course I will. You are my husband." She hesitated, then added, "And you have become my friend." "Friend," Nathan repeated, and she could not quite read his tone. He was quiet for a long moment, then reached over and took her hand. "Beatrice, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "These past few weeks with you, getting to know you, living with you, they have been some of the best of my life." He stroked his thumb across her knuckles. "When I offered to marry you, I did it because I wanted to help. I did not expect to care about you the way I do now, but I do care. More than I probably should, given the circumstances." Beatrice's breath caught. "Nathan, you do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. When I am out there chasing outlaws, you are what I will be thinking about. You are what will bring me home." The raw honesty in his words made her eyes sting with tears. She squeezed his hand. "Then you had better come home safe. Because I will be waiting for you." Nathan lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "I promise." The next morning, Beatrice woke before dawn to find Nathan already dressed and packing supplies. She got up and made him breakfast, trying to memorize the lines of his face as he ate. When it was time for him to leave, he pulled her into a brief embrace. "Be safe," she whispered against his chest. "Always." He pulled back and looked down at her. "I will be back before you know it." Then he was gone, riding off into the gray pre-dawn light, and Beatrice was alone. The house felt too quiet without him. She threw herself into work, weeding the garden, preserving vegetables, sewing a new shirt for Nathan to surprise him with when he returned. But at night, the silence was oppressive. She found herself sleeping in the office on the cot where Nathan had been sleeping just to feel closer to him. 5 days passed with no word. Then 6. Beatrice tried not to worry, but she could not help imagining all the things that could go wrong. Outlaws who drew faster, horses that stumbled in rough terrain. 1,000 ways a lawman could die. On the 7th day, she was in the garden when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up and saw Nathan riding toward the house, and relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees went weak. She dropped her basket and ran to meet him. Nathan barely had time to dismount before she threw herself into his arms. He caught her with a surprised laugh, holding her tight against him. "I take it you missed me," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I was so worried." Beatrice pulled back to look at him, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Just tired. We caught the fugitive, but he led us on quite a chase through the mountains." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes searching hers. "I missed you too, every moment I was gone." Beatrice realized they were standing very close, his hands on her face, her hands on his chest. The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. She saw the question in his eyes, the careful restraint. She made the decision in an instant, rising up on her toes and kissing him. Not the brief, chaste kiss they had shared at their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and searching. Nathan made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back, pulling her flush against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Beatrice, are you sure?" "I am sure." She looked up at him, saw the hope and hunger in his expression. "I want to be your wife, truly your wife." Nathan swept her up into his arms, making her gasp and laugh. He carried her into the house and straight to the bedroom, kicking the door shut behind them. They fell onto the bed together, and for the first time, Beatrice gave herself over completely to this man who had saved her, who had cared for her, who had waited patiently for her to be ready. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the sheets, skin to skin, hearts still racing. Nathan traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch infinitely gentle. "I love you," he said quietly. "I probably should not say it so soon, but it is the truth. I love you, Beatrice." Beatrice felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you too. I think I have been falling in love with you for weeks, but I was too afraid to admit it, afraid of being hurt again. I will never hurt you." Nathan wiped away her tears with his thumb. "I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life proving you can trust me." "You already have," Beatrice said. She kissed him again, slow and deep, and felt him smile against her lips. They stayed in bed for the rest of that day and into the evening, learning each other's bodies, talking and laughing and making love until they were both exhausted. When they finally emerged for dinner, Beatrice felt transformed. She was not the scared, humiliated girl who had been left at the altar. She was a woman in love with her husband, building a life that was better than anything she could have imagined. The months that followed were the happiest of Beatrice's life. She and Nathan fell into an easy rhythm, partners in every sense of the word. When he was home, they spent their evenings together on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. When he had to leave for work, she kept busy with the house and garden, secure in the knowledge that he would always come back to her. They visited her family regularly, and everyone could see the change in Beatrice. She glowed with happiness, and Nathan was clearly devoted to her. Thomas admitted to Margaret that he had been wrong to doubt the strange marriage. Nathan had turned out to be exactly what their daughter needed. In September, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening over dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, he just stared at her, and she worried he was not ready for a child. Then he let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, though the answer was obvious. "Happy? I am the luckiest man alive." Nathan knelt down and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your mama and I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Nathan became even more protective, insisting that Beatrice not overwork herself, bringing her anything she needed. She found his hovering both annoying and endearing. In February, her mother came to stay with them to help prepare for the baby's arrival. Margaret and Nathan got along well, bonding over their shared love for Beatrice. Thomas visited when he could, bringing supplies and helping Nathan repair the barn roof before the spring rains came. On a cold night in early March 1879, Beatrice went into labor. Nathan paced the main room while Margaret attended to his wife, occasionally calling out encouragements through the bedroom door. The labor was long and difficult, and as the hours stretched on, Nathan became increasingly frantic. Finally, just as the sun was rising, a baby's cry rang out. Nathan rushed to the bedroom door, his heart in his throat. Margaret emerged, exhausted but smiling, holding a small bundle. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, beautiful baby boy." Nathan took the baby with trembling hands, looking down at the tiny red face. His son. He had a son. Tears streamed down his face as he carried the baby to the bed, where Beatrice lay pale but radiant. "Look at him," she whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's dark, downy hair. "He is perfect." "He is perfect because he is yours," Nathan said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for weeks, unable to agree. But now, looking at their son, Beatrice knew. "Thomas," she said, "after my father, Thomas James." Nathan smiled through his tears. "Thomas James. I like that. Welcome to the world, little Thomas." The baby thrived, a happy, healthy child with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, often walking the floor with Thomas at night when he fussed, singing lullabies in his rough voice. Beatrice would watch them together and feel her heart might burst with love. 2 years later, they had a daughter, whom they named Margaret after Beatrice's mother. And 3 years after that, another son, Samuel. Their little house felt full and alive with the sounds of children playing, and Nathan built on an additional bedroom to accommodate their growing family. He continued his work as a deputy marshal, but he took fewer dangerous assignments, unwilling to risk leaving his family without a father. He had seen what that did to a family, and he would not let it happen to his children. Beatrice sometimes thought about that day at the church, when Frederick had abandoned her and Nathan had ridden up like a knight from a storybook. She thought about how devastated she had been, how certain that her life was ruined. She could see now that it had been the beginning of something wonderful, though she had not known it at the time. One evening, when the children were asleep and she and Nathan were sitting on the porch watching the stars, she said as much to him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Frederick had shown up that day?" Nathan asked. "If I had just ridden on past," Beatrice shuddered at the thought. "I try not to, but I know I would not have been as happy with him as I am with you. I might have had a comfortable life, but not a joyful one." "I think about it sometimes," Nathan admitted. "About how close I came to not stopping. I almost did, you know. Told myself it was not my business that you were a stranger to me, but something made me turn my horse around. Some instinct." "I am glad you listened to it." Beatrice took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You saved me that day, Nathan, not just from humiliation, but from a life that would have been wrong for me. You gave me a real marriage, a real family." "You saved me too," Nathan said. "I was just going through the motions before you. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I had forgotten what it was like to have something to come home to, someone to live for. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the night sky. In the distance, a coyote howled, and from inside the house came the sound of little Samuel crying. Beatrice started to get up, but Nathan stopped her. "I will go," he said, kissing her forehead. "You rest." She watched him go inside, heard his soothing voice as he comforted their son, and felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Life was not always what you expected. Sometimes it was better. The years passed peacefully. Thomas grew into a serious, studious boy who loved books as much as his father did. Margaret was spirited and adventurous, always getting into mischief. Samuel was the baby, sweet-natured and gentle. They filled the house with laughter and noise and love. Nathan eventually became the marshal of Carson City, a promotion that meant he could stay closer to home. He still dealt with his share of trouble, breaking up saloon fights and tracking down the occasional horse thief, but the dangerous manhunts were largely behind him. Beatrice took on more responsibilities in the community, helping establish a school where Catherine, now married herself, taught. She organized church socials and fundraisers, becoming known as someone who could get things done. She thought often of the frightened girl she had been on her wedding day and marveled at how much she had changed. Her parents aged gracefully, eventually turning over most of the ranch work to hired hands. They spent long visits at Beatrice and Nathan's house, doting on their grandchildren. Thomas Garrett admitted more than once that he could not have asked for a better son-in-law than Nathan James. Frederick Marsh became a distant memory, a footnote to a life that had turned out far better than expected. Beatrice heard rumors over the years that he had fled to California, that he had married someone else, that he had met a bad end in a mining accident. She did not care enough to find out the truth. He was part of her past, and her past had no power over her present. One summer evening when Thomas was 16, Margaret 14, and Samuel 11, the whole family sat down to dinner together. It had become harder to manage as the children got older and busier with their own interests, but Nathan insisted on it at least once a week. "Your mother and I have an announcement," Nathan said as they cleared the dishes. The children looked up with interest. "Are we getting another sibling?" Margaret asked, wrinkling her nose. "No," Beatrice said with a laugh. She was 41 now, and 3 children were quite enough. "Your father has been offered a position as United States Marshal for Nevada. It is a great honor." The children erupted in excited chatter. U.S. Marshal was a prestigious position, overseeing all the deputy marshals in the state. It meant more responsibility, more respect, and a better income. "Are we moving?" Thomas asked, ever practical. "No, the position is based here in Carson City," Nathan explained. "I will have to travel more, visiting the different marshal offices around the state, but this will always be home." After dinner, Beatrice and Nathan walked out to their favorite spot, a small rise behind the house where they could see for miles in every direction. The land had changed in the 18 years since their wedding. More houses, more farms, more signs of civilization encroaching on the wild country, but the mountains were eternal and the sky still stretched endlessly overhead. "U.S. Marshal," Beatrice said, leaning against Nathan's side. "My husband, the U.S. Marshal, who would have thought? Certainly not me when I was a boy watching my mother wait for a man who was never coming back." Nathan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I never imagined I could have this. A family, a career, a life that matters." "You matter to me," Beatrice said fiercely. "You always have." Nathan turned her to face him, framing her face with his hands the way he had so many times over the years. "You know what tomorrow is?" Beatrice thought for a moment, then smiled. 18 years. It has been 18 years since we got married. 18 years since I rode into Genoa and made the best decision of my life. Nathan kissed her softly. Should we renew our vows? Have a proper ceremony this time with planning and preparation? No, Beatrice said. I like our story just the way it is. The impulsive, wild, impossible wedding that should not have worked but did. It definitely did. Nathan pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I love you, Beatrice James. I have loved you since the moment you said I do to a stranger in front of half of Genoa. I love you too, though I think it took me a bit longer to get there. She laughed softly, but I got there in the end. They stood together watching the sun set, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. In the house behind them, their children argued about whose turn it was to wash dishes. Life was messy and complicated and sometimes difficult, but it was theirs. Beatrice thought again about that June day in 1878, standing alone in her wedding dress while a town full of people stared and whispered. She remembered the despair, the humiliation, the certainty that her life was over. And then Nathan had appeared, a stranger on horseback, offering her a choice. I will stand beside you. He had kept that promise for 18 years. Through good times and bad, through 3 childbirths and countless sleepless nights, through sickness and health and all the daily challenges of building a life together. He had stood beside her. And she had learned to stand beside him. That was what love was, she thought. Not the grand romantic gestures or the passionate declarations, though those had their place. Real love was choosing to show up day after day. It was building something together, brick by brick, year by year. It was standing beside someone even when it was hard, even when it was scary, even when you did not know how things would turn out. The children grew older. Thomas went to university in San Francisco, then came back to Nevada to become a lawyer. Margaret shocked everyone by becoming a deputy marshal herself, the first woman in Nevada to hold the position. Samuel followed his grandfather into ranching, taking over the Garrett property when Thomas and Margaret were too old to manage it themselves. Nathan served as U.S. Marshal for 12 years before finally retiring at 60. By then, his hair was more gray than dark, and he moved a bit slower than he used to, but his eyes were still that same striking gray, and he still looked at Beatrice like she was the most precious thing in the world. They spent their retirement years traveling, visiting places they had always wanted to see. They went to San Francisco to see Thomas and his family. They traveled to Denver and Cheyenne, seeing how the West was changing as the 19th century drew to a close. But they always came back to Carson City, to the little house that Nathan had built and that had held so much love over the years. On their 40th wedding anniversary, in June 1918, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Thomas came with his wife and 3 children. Margaret brought her husband, a fellow marshal she had met on the job, and their twin daughters. Samuel arrived with his wife and their 4 sons, the youngest of whom was named Nathan after his grandfather. It was a large, boisterous gathering, full of laughter and storytelling. The grandchildren begged Nathan to tell them about his adventures as a lawman, and he obliged with stories carefully edited to remove the most frightening parts. Beatrice watched from her chair on the porch, now expanded and furnished with comfortable seating, and marveled at the family they had built. Later, when the party had wound down and the grandchildren were sleeping scattered throughout the house and barn, Beatrice and Nathan found themselves alone again on the porch. 40 years, Nathan said, taking her hand. His hands were gnarled now with age, the joints stiff from arthritis, but his grip was still strong. That is longer than I thought I would live, let alone be married. Are you sorry? Beatrice teased. She was 62 now, her dark hair streaked with white, her face lined with the evidence of a life well lived. All those years stuck with me, not for a single moment. Nathan raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles the way he had done countless times over the decades. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice James. You and our family. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where you married a complete stranger in front of half of Genoa. Especially that part. Nathan's eyes twinkled. Though I will admit it was a risky move. Could have ended very badly. But it did not, Beatrice said. It ended with this, with us, with our children and grandchildren, with a lifetime of love. Not ended yet, Nathan corrected. We still have time left. We do, Beatrice agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. What should we do with it? Keep living. Keep loving. Keep being grateful for every day we get together. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out overhead, the same stars that had watched over them for 40 years. In the distance, a coyote howled, the eternal sound of the Nevada desert. Inside the house, one of the grandchildren laughed in their sleep. Beatrice thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that terrible day at the church to this moment of profound contentment. She had been so sure that her life was ruined, that she would never recover from the humiliation of being abandoned at the altar. She had been wrong. Sometimes the worst moments of your life were actually doorways to something better. Sometimes when one path closed, another opened that led somewhere you never expected but desperately needed to go. Sometimes a stranger on horseback turned out to be exactly what you were looking for, even though you did not know it at the time. Nathan had stood beside her, just as he promised, and in doing so, he had taught her what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale romance she had imagined with Frederick, but something deeper and more enduring. A love built on respect and friendship and daily choice. A love that weathered storms and celebrated sunshine. A love that only grew stronger with time. Thank you, Beatrice whispered. For what? For riding up when you did, for making that offer, for being the man you are. Nathan kissed the top of her head. Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on a stranger, for building this life with me. They stayed on the porch until the night grew cool, then went inside to the bedroom they had shared for 4 decades. As Nathan helped Beatrice out of her dress, his fingers still gentle despite their stiffness, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. She was old now, there was no denying it. But she did not mourn her lost youth. Every line on her face had been earned through laughter or tears or deep thought. Every gray hair was a badge of years well spent. She climbed into bed beside Nathan, fitting her body against his in the familiar way of long marriage. He wrapped his arms around her, and she felt safe and loved and home. "Good night, my love," Nathan murmured. "Good night," Beatrice replied. She fell asleep thinking about young Beatrice in her wedding dress, terrified and humiliated and certain her life was over. If only she could tell that girl what was coming. If only she could tell her that the stranger who rode up was not a temporary solution, but a permanent blessing. If only she could tell her that the man who promised to stand beside her would keep that promise for the rest of their lives. But perhaps it was better not knowing. Perhaps the uncertainty was part of what made it all so precious. They had not known they would fall in love, but they had. They had not known they would build such a beautiful family, but they had. They had not known a marriage born of desperation would become a love story for the ages, but it had. Nathan and Beatrice James lived another 6 years together, surrounded by family and friends, still devoted to each other until the very end. When Nathan passed away in his sleep at the age of 76, Beatrice held his hand and whispered goodbye to the man who had saved her, loved her, and stood beside her for 46 years. She followed him 2 years later, dying peacefully in her own bed with her children gathered around her. Her last words were, "Tell your father I am coming." And those who were there swore she smiled just before the end, as if she saw something wonderful waiting for her. They were buried side by side in the Carson City Cemetery, under a shared headstone that reads simply, "Nathan and Beatrice James, together forever." Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued to tell their story, the tale of the woman abandoned at the altar and the cowboy who rode up and said, "I will stand beside you." It became a legend in Carson City, this story of an impulsive wedding that turned into the truest love. People would visit their grave and marvel at the romantic story. Young couples would promise to love each other the way Nathan and Beatrice had. And the family they built continued to thrive in Nevada for generations. The little house that Nathan built still stood decades later, preserved by the family as a reminder of where it all began. Inside, visitors could see the bedroom where 3 children were born, the kitchen where countless meals were shared, the porch where 2 people fell in love gradually and completely. And in the church in Genoa, now much larger than it had been in 1878, there hung a small plaque commemorating the most unusual wedding in the town's history. It told the story of Beatrice Garrett, abandoned at the altar, and Nathan James, the lawman who offered her salvation. It spoke of a marriage that should not have worked but became the gold standard for what love could be. The plaque ended with the words Nathan had spoken that day, words that had changed 2 lives forever. "I will stand beside you," because that, in the end, was what it was all about. Standing beside someone through the good times and bad. Choosing them every day, even when it was hard. Building something together that was stronger than either of you could have created alone. It was not the wedding Beatrice had planned, but it was the marriage she had needed. It was not the life she had expected, but it was the life she had been meant to live. And in the end, she had been grateful for every moment of it, even the terrifying beginning. Because sometimes when everything falls apart, it is actually falling together. Sometimes the worst day of your life is the first day of the rest of your life. And sometimes, a stranger on horseback turns out to be your soulmate, your partner, your forever. Nathan and Beatrice James proved that love does not always look the way you think it will. That it can spring up in the most unlikely circumstances. That it grows strongest not in the absence of adversity, but in the presence of commitment. Their story lived on long after they were gone, inspiring others to take chances, to believe in second beginnings, to trust that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming. It reminded people that love was not just about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about showing up, standing firm, and choosing each other, day after day after day. And on quiet evenings in Carson City, when the sun set over the Sierra Nevada and the desert air grew cool, people sometimes thought they could see 2 figures on the porch of the old James house, sitting close together, hands clasped, watching the stars come out. Just ghosts, perhaps, or tricks of the light. But also, maybe, a reminder that real love never truly dies. It lives on in the stories we tell, in the families we build, in the promises we keep. I will stand beside you. 4 simple words that changed everything. 4 simple words that built a legacy. 4 simple words that proved sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with crisis and end with contentment, that begin with strangers and end with soulmates, that start with a desperate choice and end with a lifetime of joy. The story of Nathan and Beatrice James was not just their story. It belonged to everyone who heard it and took courage from it. Everyone who faced their own crisis and wondered if they could survive. everyone who took a chance on something uncertain and found something wonderful, everyone who believed that love was worth fighting for, worth building, worth protecting. Their legacy was not just their children and grandchildren, though that family tree spread wide and deep through Nevada. It was not just the house Nathan built, though it stood as a testament to solid foundations. It was not just the stories that were told, though those inspired generations. Their legacy was the proof that love conquers all, that kindness matters, that showing up for someone in their darkest hour can change the course of their entire life. It was the demonstration that marriage is not about the wedding day, but about all the days that follow. It was the reminder that the best things in life often come from the worst moments, if we are brave enough to see the opportunity in the crisis. And so the story ended where it began, in a small Nevada town, with a woman in a wedding dress and a man on horseback. But between that beginning and the peaceful ending, between that moment of desperation and that lifetime of love, there had been a beautiful story. A story of courage and choice, of standing firm and standing together, of building something lasting from the ashes of something broken. Beatrice and Nathan James had lived fully, loved completely, and left behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. They had proved that sometimes, when you are abandoned at the altar and a cowboy rides up and says, "I will stand beside you," the best thing you can do is say yes. Because that yes might lead to 46 years of happiness, 3 wonderful children, a dozen grandchildren, a legacy of love, and a story that would be told for generations to come. Their love story was complete, their lives well lived, their promise kept. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. A life filled with love, a partner who stayed true, and a story worth telling long after the final chapter had been written.